basically, this panel is on interactive media and placemaking, which, as you guys saw from all of the amazing stuff we witnessed tonight, are really, really cutting edge and interesting ways of storytelling using new media. My name is Niki Selken, as I said, and I'm an artist, technologist, and educator. My work right now focuses on storytelling, XR games, which is sort of like umbrella term for VR, AR, and other, and immersive design. I run the Education and Artist Incubator program at Gray Area in the Mission. And Gray Area, for the past decade, has been showcasing work on the cutting edge of art and technology. So we're both we're in an old movie theater. We've been there for almost 5 years. And that movie theater was a dollar store for the longest time. And I think it was actually featured in the Los Siete film. Like I'm like, oh, that's where I work. So I'm always right there. Like that's my little hangout. So it was really just cool to see this. I'm gonna go through and just introduce people in no particular order, just the order I wrote it on my paper. Keith Wilson is a filmmaker and artist based in San Francisco whose films have been exhibited at Sundance, the Berlinale, South by Southwest, the United States National Gallery of Art, and, we're getting some water. He is in production on a feature documentary and mixed reality experience about life and work of the performance artist Frank Moore, and he is the creator of The Gangway. And he talked to the internet on stage today. Welcome, Keith. Yang Liu is a 3D interactive engineer and new media artist. Yang is exploring the paradigm and possibilities of immersive interactions in VR, AR, and the future of video games. He's working at That Game Company and worked at Oculus before. His past work includes tools to plan drone trajectory in VR and AR, immersive experience of walking on a city, or within a city, and taking pictures and sound tools. There he is. Pfeiffer Garbisi, thank you, is an immersive media producer of virtual and augmented reality with content screening at Cannes, big name, Tribeca, the Nobel Peace Prize. She's passionate about emerging technology's role in storytelling and the impact it has on society. Welcome. Adam Snell, I hope I said that right, is a VR director, writer, editor, and a cinematographer. For the past 4 years, he has been creating virtual reality experiences for all types of organizations: professional sports teams, television studios, musicians, universities, and tech companies. Prior to his work in VR, he spent 4 years working as an assistant director at the City of Hope, and 2 years creating content for nonprofits and startup companies. Currently, he collaborates with Pixvana, a VR software and production company in Seattle, who has sponsored this work we saw tonight. Welcome. And next to me, we have Heather Escandon, who is a co-creator of the Real Refuge project, which we just watched. It was awesome. And finally, I'm sorry I don't have your extended bio, but Vero Majano is an artist and filmmaker and the creator of Remember Los Siete, which was amazing. Welcome. All right, so we have an extra mic. These questions I'm asking aren't directed to anyone in particular, but if people want to respond, we'll sort of pass the mic around. And all these questions are actually, I had made the artists do the work for me, and I asked them to give me questions they wanted to ask. So they're actually questions that they want to ask each other. So, yeah, and if we have time, I will ask for questions from the audience. So let's just see how much we're going to get through here, and then we'll do a little Q&A with the audience. All right, first question. What do you imagine the cities of the future to look like? Anybody? Just maybe pieces. What's something about the future cities? Or even like what this city is becoming? Because in some ways our city is a prototype for all other cities in America. It's true. Anybody want to answer that? Tackle that? Big question.
One thing that I hope that our cities of the future will look like is a collaboration. I think that virtual reality offers like an opportunity to paint on top of what's already there, and we could use VR and create new models. People from the community could come in and, create spaces that they believe would be, more welcoming, spaces that people could interact with each other more in, that are more about human connection and less about loneliness. I think cities can be very lonely, and it's important to create spaces that connect people.
Yes, agreed. Anybody else want to feed in on that? Cities, loneliness, future?
Yeah, I share exactly the same feeling. I feel like I grew up in a small city and then moved to a bigger one and moved to an even bigger one. And the bigger city I moved in, then I feel like it's a lot of things to explore, but more crowded, and sometimes I feel more isolated from people. So I really hope that in the future somehow like city could be kind of like less crowded, and people could get more connected just as like when we live in like a rural area or like a small city, like basically people know each other and be friendly with each other. But when the city getting busy and busy, then people just like isolate with each other and people do feel lonely. Yeah, and I hope that like in the future we could somehow use our technology, either the like digital technology or other part, to kind of like solve this problem and really make people connect again.
Excellent. Vero has something to say.
As someone, I was born and raised here in San Francisco, and when I think about the future, I don't see myself in it, because I don't think that the future in San Francisco is thinking of a queer Latina in her 50s and other people. So it's kind of hard to think about the future. And I've been serving the homeless community for the last 20 years. And when I think about myself and the people that I serve, that when we talk about the future in this city, I don't see being included in that. So I'm gonna concentrate on the present. And I just turned 52 years old, and I've been here my whole life. And I've been thinking that I've been witnessing and experiencing that I've been growing older in this city. And see, there's some folks out here in the audience, and we're getting grayer, we're getting thicker and nice looking. And even when I'm on the bus, I'll look out the window and I see, oh, there's that person that's been hanging around in that corner for a long time, or the guy at the grocery store, or the person with mental illness that is still surviving. And like, I think because the future is so, it's very stressful for me to think about how I'm included in it. So I'm concentrating on the present, and lately I've been thinking and seeing that I am growing old with the city, and that is something that a lot of people maybe are not experiencing. And so I concentrate on that. But the future is a very, who's included in that future? And yeah, so that's like it's a deeper conversation, so I try to concentrate on the future. On the present, and that is that some of us are aging together, and that's kind of a lovely experience.
What's something in the present that you... Ta-da. What's something in the present that you feel could help this idea that you or others are sort of either aging out or not included in the city? Like, other than, the artwork you're doing, is there something you're excited about, or some kind of, I don't know, what can help this, in your opinion?
Affordable housing for everybody. And not just affordable housing, you have housing being built, and you're just gonna give us 5% of it, and that makes someone feel good. And like, what does medium low income mean to somebody? And also that when people come in, that you have to give back to the community. And that doesn't mean you have one day and you have free food for everybody one day, and it's like a consistent commitment to the community that you're moving in. And And I also think San Francisco is so small, so there's literally not a lot of room for people. It's not that I don't think there's a future, but it is, in how we think about this city, not everybody even has the luxury to see themselves in the future here. That is even a luxury right now in San Francisco for me to see myself in the future. That's what I mean. But I mean, there's a lot of positive things, but that's why I said I like growing old here right now. So
Yeah,
yes.
no, it's an important perspective. Does anybody else want to speak to anything they think that is happening right now or can happen or should happen or you're doing to create inclusivity within the city and the spaces within the city? I mean, you're all literally doing God's work right here on stage. We just saw it. But is I don't know, is there something?
I think Gray Area does a great job of that, by the way.
There you go. Thank you.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, one of the things in like thinking about this program and putting together my piece and listening to them and putting on those headsets is like, I don't know. Like, what you're saying resonates with me because I don't see myself in the future. My partner was just telling me last night about microchips going into humans, and that's how we're going to pay for services in the future and open doors and stuff. And I was just like, I don't see that future. It's really intimidating and scary. And one of the things that scares me, and I tried to get it through in my piece, or makes me uncomfortable, is this lack of embodiment and lack of connection with other people. Sorry, I know I'm supposed to ask you if I can do that, but like, an embodied connection, like real, like tactile, touching connection is something that I hope to see in conjunction with all of these technologies, which I do think have real possibilities for things that just in conjunction with all of these things that.
One of the strangest, thank you, things, just speaking of this idea of connection and the strangest things I witnessed tonight was, Heather, you connecting with yourself through a mediated technology of VR, and you connecting with your past self. So one of the questions we have is, what was that like to open up your space and connect with yourself from the past on stage?
On stage, it was really difficult, actually. But when I was doing it, it was totally fine. But watching yourself on video is awkward.
Yes.
So
Did you feel like there was any reflections or learning, or like, I think if I had seen myself from before, maybe I would have felt like I had changed or grown, or me who I am now is somehow different from me in the past. Did any of that happen?
I've definitely changed. I'm a completely different person, actually, but I'm now the Heather that I was like always supposed to be myself.
How long ago did you guys film that?
It was in November, I think.
So
And
even now to then, things have changed.
Yeah, when we first started filming, I hadn't seen my daughter yet, actually. And
That's okay.
that picture that I showed with the heart and me and her, she actually has that picture now, and she has my Cheshire cat. So a lot has changed, and it's just getting better.
That's so great. It was so meta. Amazing.
Oh.
I can't. Just like, so moving. I am really, yeah. And then Adam, as like being the speaker, like guiding this experience, what did that feel like from, this, how did you even, where did this all start? And then like, what was that like?
Good question. Since we're at an early stage with this type of technology, we have to find creative ways to invite people into it so that we can get their perspective on what to do with it. I think that's one thing that I really like about what I do, is that we don't really know yet exactly what to do with it. So it's a real privilege working with Heather and really using the technology to show off what's really been inspiring to me, which are these old SRO hotels, single room occupancy hotels, where They're a little mysterious, a little bit like the gangway, because I'd walked by one of those facades I'd never been in, but kind of makes your imagination go crazy. I think the Tenderloin specifically does that. So we were really excited to use this technology to bring people into this model of seeing change and good things happen in our city through City Hope, which I'm have benefited personally from giving back to the community. I feel more connected to my city. So it's really fun to then think through ways with old coworkers of how we could use the skill set that I've learned over the last 4 years to really tell stories that inspire us. Just working with Heather has inspired me to be more responsible, stay on top of my stuff. So I think that this format has allowed us to be able to share kind of something that was pretty personal, bring us into your room. That is something that's been really impressive, just your openness and opening up your life and house to us.
And moving outward from an extremely personal story to Yang's work, where you basically are taking, like, in some ways, the pulse of a city through Twitter tweets. What were, like, I know that Yang also did this same thing with New York. So what was the difference in the vibe of San Francisco from Twitter versus the vibe of New York? Like, what did you learn about the city?
Yeah, so I basically actually started from San Francisco because I do like live close to here rather than New York. But I finally chose to do both because, like, first of all, like, that's true that it's really interesting to compare with. And actually, I think the most thing I find interesting is actually the volume of the city. Like, New York is a really kind of large one. Like, people get spread it out everywhere and many districts. While San Francisco is a big city, but it's kind of squeezed together. And like in New York, people tend to talk about more different things. And in San Francisco, like, it's more like kind of like a little bit like less with less variety, and many people like gather together and stay in the one place and talk about the same thing.
What are those things? What do we always talk about?
Well, so when I try to like work on my piece, like, I actually started from only getting those Twitters with geolocation, so that I can like spawn those accordingly in my virtual city, right? But then actually later on, I stopped doing that because I find, like, when people go out and be happy with share my location in Twitter, typically they're doing something like kind of a little bit boring, like I'm eating here, the food is good, or like I'm having a nice museum experience, or like I'm checking in here. So yeah, that's basically people do every day. And then
It's like the text version of a food selfie, basically?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
And then, so basically, I find that my challenge is basically to extract some kind of like since I started this project from a kind of a emotional like perspective, so my challenge would be like extract more emotional tweets from all of these kind of more daily tweets, because I want to find something about people, like what they really feel about staying in the city, rather than just like share food.
Did you find that overall, like, any sentiment that was strong in San Francisco, like, were we optimistic? Were we excited? Like, what was the sentiments that you found?
One thing I find that when there are a large population, I feel the sentiment is kind of like get like flattened. Like, as an average, like if you read a lot of tweets, like I don't really find like a very obvious difference to say like San Francisco people is more happy or New York people is more happy or like that. It's more like sometimes it's related to location. Some specific area in the city might have like a tendency of a specific emotion, but as for two cities, I find it's kind of really similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of, the city as a living being, which I just made a good transition there, I have a question, which is one of your questions, which is one of my favorite questions on here. Can the archive of a space or spaces hold the memories of that space? It's kind of a meta question, but I don't know. I mean, especially like Keith or others down the line, or anybody, honestly. Can that, yeah, how does that work? Can it? Did yours? And I know we haven't heard from Pfeiffer. Yes. And she, I just do want to tell you, in case you didn't watch it, did a documentary of Cuba and the emerging like music scene and the dance club scene, the DJ scene there. So, yeah, I don't know.
Do you want to answer, or do you have?
Just to clarify, it's definitely not an emerging music scene. It's like a very old, like underground rave scene, and it's about their sudden contact with American culture in the lifting of the embargo.
So maybe emerging to us. Like
Yes, definitely. I don't know if this answers the question so well. I think that it depends who's doing the archiving. A lot of times, like, people who get to make documentaries are really privileged. Like, I'm very privileged to be able to make documentaries. I think a lot of times, like, in immersive media, this trend continues where, like, for example, people love making, like, these immersive media pieces about, like, refugees, and they feel like, you know, what's always talked about in, like, VR conferences is that, like, you know, you can really be there and like live the life, and what do they say, like be in the footsteps of these people. And like, I think that that's really dangerous to like start saying that. Like, you don't get to really be there as a refugee just by putting on a VR headset. And I think that, like, in terms of like who's doing the archiving, like the best that we can do is give communities tools to make their own media. That would be ideal. Like, for instance, like, I grew up in Oakland, and I went to BAVAC when I was little, and BAVAC was like, hey, like, you can be a filmmaker. And I was like, what? Like, I thought, like, filmmakers were like, you know. And so, like, you know, giving people those tools would be ideal. And the second level down from that is like working with people really intimately to tell their story. And yeah, I mean, it's a slippery slope. So it depends who's doing the archiving.
Yeah.
I actually want to share the footage that I showed was from, it's from Ray Balberon, who I've worked with, and I've had the privilege of going through his archives and cataloging it for him. And he in the 70s, KQD didn't have any people of color producers, so him and other folks demanded for them to make them producers, and they got cameras from them, they got Bolex. So what I love about that dolly shot is that it's someone learning how to use a camera. So someone's teaching them, it's a Bolex camera, and that's why I tell people, save with it, don't get rid of things, because it's such a beautiful document of place and who was there. Also, what I love about that document is the Latino community's younger in that, and the people who are older are the older immigrants that didn't leave the mission. And I like to, at least with my projects and in the work that I have, I'm trying to archive the mission with my stories, at least in this space collectively, that we archive it together in this moment. So that's something that I'm trying to do with my work, because at least in this moment, because sometimes that's all I have, but I do think that I am archiving his footage, because someone would just, you know, the filmmaker just stopped making it or put it away. It didn't come out right because it's a little bumpy, but I just go crazy for that kind of footage. And I just, yeah, I like fall in love every time I see that piece, and I've seen it so many times. So for me, archiving is sharing that footage with a new audience or people that were there. You know, like I have other footage that I worked with, lowrider footage that was shot on 24th Street in the 80s, and there's a short documentary about it, and the best part is when there's people in the audience saying, oh, that's my grandpa, that's my cousin up there. So I feel that that's how, with my work, that I'm archiving it at least in that kind of way with the audience.
Time check? Okay, this is our last question, and I will ask for a question from the audience. Someone raise your hand. One last question. One last question. Or I'm just going to ask one that I made up. Yes. Yeah, so how can we use these emerging technologies that we were featured today to increase civic dialogue? Go.
Okay, so one idea is you could have a VR station. So you can create really easily like 3D models in VR. So that's a really great way to democratize like the use of, you know, architecture tools. So instead of having like a bunch of big architects like bid on a project, you could have people from the community like come in and say like, you know, we want, you know, we want this to have like more open park space on the top, and they could draw on top of those models in VR really easily. We could also like bring in 3D models from different artists and just like super easily like create spaces virtually, and then have people, like what I would love is to have like a blockchain-based like civic participation app where people could be like, yes, I like this, and yeah, no more electoral college also.
Yay. VR for good. Does anyone have any blockchain for good? Now that's something. Does anybody have any other ideas? How can we leverage these new technologies to increase civic engagement? I will just say one thing, even though I'm not on the panel. There's a project called New Palmyra, where this guy basically documented all these, I think it's Lebanese, like these Middle Eastern buildings that were historical, and then created an open source 3D environments that anyone can use. So it does happen.
Yeah, my quick note is that I feel we're getting a little bit numb to other formats in video. So I think there's opportunity, even though sometimes it feels a little bit awkward, to use new technologies that, you know, virtual reality makes you feel like you're in a place, but that doesn't end there. I think that we need to be responsible in the types of experiences that we make, and we're not causing trauma. But I really do, or this opportunity here tonight is really exciting for me because it's all relationship and finding ways to empathize with one another and not isolate from each other. So that's technology can be a tool for that, and it can also further separate us. So it's about what you do with it. And it's also about access, like we said, and who has access to it. That's why I work at a community arts organization. We have really inexpensive and also do a lot of programming with kids, whatever. Like, there are ways you can create access to these technologies, but I think that the majority of what we see is for profit and not accessible technology. So let's change that. Thank you all for coming, and let's give a round of applause to these amazing people on stage. You did such great work tonight.